Matt Wellens from the Bulldog Insider Podcast here. This is part 2 of the 2-part Season 4 finale. You can find part 1 with the 5th-year seniors of the UMD men's hockey team in your podcast feed. A heads up that Zach Schneider, Bruce Ciskie, and I recorded this question and answer episode on Tuesday afternoon, just a few hours before sophomore defenseman Connor Kelley entered the transfer portal. So as I record this intro now on Wednesday, it is actually 4 Bulldogs in the transfer portal, not just the 3 that we discuss in this episode. You can read how Kelley's move impacts the Bulldogs' blue line at DuluthNewsTribune.com and TheRinkLive.com. I have stories there. Now, on to the show.
Here, our hobbies become our work, and our work becomes our passion. But when joint pain or injuries keep us from doing what we love, it can affect our entire way of life. That's why we meet these challenges head on. Whatever your good day looks like, we'll find it together. This is Essentia Health Orthopedics and Sports Medicine, like nowhere else. Visit essentiahealth.org.
Hello and welcome to the Bulldog Insider Podcast, brought to you by Essentia Health. I'm Matt Wellens, the Bulldogs hockey beat writer at the Duluth News Tribune and the Rink Live.
And I'm Zach Schneider, the television voice of UMD Hockey and My9 Sports.
Welcome to part 2 of the Season 4 finale of the Bulldog Insider Podcast. In part 1, Zach and I caught up one last time with Ben Pat, Kobe Roth, Kobe Bender, and Matt Anderson to talk about their 5 seasons as Bulldogs. You can find that episode in your podcast feed or at DuluthNewsTribune.com and TheRinkLive.com. In part 2 of this extended Season 4 finale, Zach, myself, and the voice of Bulldogs hockey on KDAL, Bruce Ciskie. Hi, Bruce.
Hello, how's it going?
We're all here to answer your questions about the men's and women's hockey program from the 2021-2022 season, and we're going to look ahead to the 2022-23 season as well. Most of your questions are looking ahead already to next season. Let's get right into the questions, guys. We're going to try and pack as many of the questions that we got into this episode as possible. The first one came from Joan in my email inbox, and she asked if she could get an update on how Jason Garrison is doing after graduating and trying to re-enter the pro hockey world. So I went and looked it up. I'll admit, kind of lost track of what Jason was doing and such. We tried to get him on the podcast here this season, but he was a busy guy after graduation. So for those who don't know, Jason Garrison came back for 2 semesters or a part of 2 seasons as a student assistant coach with the Bulldogs. He was doing that while completing his bachelor's degree, graduated in December, which per stupid NCAA rules meant he could no longer be a student assistant coach anymore. But he got a good deal out of it anyway. Still, he signed a professional tryout deal, PTO, with the Lightning's top minor league affiliate, the Syracuse Crunch of the AHL. Unfortunately, he only played 9 games. From what I read, suffered an injury, and then he was later released. He turns 38 in November. Guys, do you think we're going to see Jason Garrison in pro hockey, whether it's here in North America or maybe in Europe, or is he going to be a coach maybe somewhere next year? Zach, what do you think?
I got the sense when he left, and it showed with him signing that PTO with Tampa's organization. I got the sense when he left that he kind of reinvigorated his love of the game when he was here coaching and wanted to get back playing. But 38's awfully old in hockey terms. My guess is that this was kind of his last kick at the can, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him coaching somewhere next year. But that's not to say that if he has the fire in it. It sounds like, talking to the guys, that he was a leader in the workout room during his time on the Bulldogs bench. So if he decides to get after it in the offseason, who knows, maybe he can play till he's 39, 40.
Bruce, what do you think?
I've learned a long time ago to stop betting against Jason Garrison. He lasted a lot longer than I would have ever guessed he would in the pros. If he wants to play, I'm sure he could find a spot too. But my guess would be that he's coaching or scouting next season, because it does sound like he wants to stay involved in the game.
All right, next question from our friend Biddy. And this question was kind of all-encompassing, and it actually summed up a lot of questions that a lot of people sent our way. He'd like a breakdown on who is coming back for a 5th year or not, and how the roster looks for next year with a short preview of the incoming freshmen. I actually have a story now up on DuluthNewsTribune.com and TheRakeLive.com. I've been sitting on it because I haven't had a chance to talk to Scott Sandlin yet. None of us had. He didn't have he hasn't had a end of season wrap up. Everyone was kind of busy last week with this Noah Cates kid making his NHL debut at XL Energy Center, and then this week I thought about reaching out to Scott, but you know what? I want him to be a dad this week. His son Ryan's playing in the Frozen Four with Minnesota State. He's heading out to Boston to watch that. So I'm going to let Scott be a dad. When he gets back from Boston, maybe I'll touch base with them. But still was able to kind of go through where we're at. I have reached out to a number of the UMD seniors to see what their plans are. One got back to me with a non-answer, and I'm still waiting to hear back from some other guys. So they're still working on their decisions. Again, I think everyone's taken some time to figure things out here, but I'll just run through right now. Like, we'll start with the women. The women's team's pretty much set. It's pretty simple, unless another former Patty Kazmir Award winner drops into the transfer portal and wants to come to Duluth again. But I don't think we're going to see that for a while. Fifth-year seniors, the women are going to have back Gabby Hughes. Naomi Rogi's actually coming back for a sixth year. Taylor Anderson, Annie Linzer, Lizzie Norton, Kylie Hanley, Maggie Flaherty, and, Ashton Bell will also be back for a fifth year. Recruits coming in for the women, because they have those fifth years. They don't have a lot of recruits coming in. Forwards Danielle Brunette and Danielle Bergen of Chisago Lakes. This kind of reminds me of when UMD brought in Hughes and Linzer from Centennial. That worked out pretty well, bringing in teammates. And then defenseman Tova Henderson and goalie Haley McLeod, both from the Delta Hockey Academy in BC. I think the women's roster's pretty set, guys. Wouldn't you say? I don't know if they're going to be going into the transfer portal at all this offseason. Again, unless there's, a once in a lifetime talent sitting out there. Zach, what do you think?
Yeah, every once in a while you get Elizabeth Shiger sitting out there, and you'll move some pieces around to get her on your team. But yeah, unless there's a talent like hers out there, I mean, UMD it not only has its roster set on the women's side, but it's loaded for next year. They kind of answered the question that we thought they were going to have to answer after this year, which was the big one in goal. Emma Soderberg says she's leaving, but they have JoJo Cho back for a couple years, and that recruit Haley McLeod from Delta Hockey Academy. Danny Bergen from Chisago Lakes was a Miss Hockey Award finalist this year. So those are maybe two of the freshmen that can contribute right away. But obviously the big names that are back, Gabby Hughes, Ashton Bell, Naomi Rogi, Maggie Flaherty, who didn't get to play in the home stretch of this Frozen Four run. So yeah, they're going to be good again in the Frozen Fours in Duluth. So it could be fun.
Only at UMD, Bruce, can the two teams lose goaltenders like Emma Soderberg and Ryan Fanti, and everyone's like, yeah, we're fine. We're good. Everything. JoJo Chobek and Zach Stayskull are here. We're good. We're okay. Everything's fine. No reason to panic. Excited for next season to see these two get their shot, right?
University of goaltending, guys. That's what we call it. And I it's proven itself time and time again. And I have little reason to think that it's not going to do so again. We saw JoJo Chobak down the stretch. She was tremendous in goal for UMD. And, yes, it's different when it's a full season. It's different when you're the number one goaltender. I understand all that, but there's no reason to think she can't handle this. And obviously on the men's side, Zach Stayskull, people forget, he started the regional game against North Dakota last season, and he started the Frozen Four game against UMass last season. It's not like he was bad in those situations. If he's back and he's healthy, and kind of anywhere near the level he showed he could be to as a freshman, UMD's got a lot of reason for hope, both men's and women's, in terms of what they got back in goal.
Yeah, and moving on to the men's roster here, this is where it gets complicated. They had five players that could come back for 6 years. They're down to just 3 that potentially could do it. UMD has 3 players in the transfer portal right now, and these are 3 guys that have not had, they've had to battle for ice time in their career, and it doesn't look like with what's coming in that they're going to see the ice much again next season. So they're going to try their hand and see what else is out there. And that's forwards Ben Almquist and Jarrett Lee. Jarrett Lee transferred in from Northern Michigan, so he's looking for his 3rd school. And then defenseman Jake Rosenbaum, who I think it's a bummer to lose him in the locker room. He's a pretty popular guy, but he has the right, and I think he's deserved after 4 years to go find possibly a team whether it's at the Division I level. These guys, you could go D3. There's lots of options that they could go find ice time. And just a question that came in as I scroll down here, both Rick and Jeremy in my email inbox asked about the transfer portal. Once a player enters the portal, I hate calling it the transfer portal. It sounds like it's some weird dimension or something like that. But once a player enters the transfer portal, is the door shut for going back to their old team? Or if a new team doesn't express interest, can they go back to their old team? Yes and yes. Like the door does not shut. They can come back, but the Bulldogs would also have to want them back and have roster spots as well. I'm guessing these three guys would not be on scholarship if they were all coming back and such. So it's a toss up. I doubt these guys are coming back. Once you enter the portal, it seems to be a done deal. Either it's UMD told these guys that the playing time's not going to be there, or they're looking for something else. Guys, your thoughts on the three guys in the transfer portal? Let's start there. Bruce?
Well, hey, obviously it stinks to lose guys, right? You don't ever want that to happen, but these guys they're at a point in their career they want to play in all likelihood, and there's three programs that'll be new to Division I next season, with Stonehill coming in Massachusetts and Anchorage and Lindenwood. So there's opportunity out there for a lot of players that maybe weren't getting the ice time that they wanted to get, the role they wanted to get, if they think that they can, take that step and have a better experience. If that's what they're looking for, I say more power to them. And, I wish them nothing but the best of luck. They're guys that'll be missed, but these are guys that, on the other hand, didn't play a ton. So, it's depth spots, and hopefully the coaching staff can fill those, because you don't want to be short depth. We all saw that over the course of this first half of the season. The Bulldogs are sapped in their depth a number of different times.
Yeah, I mean, we can, as media members, maybe dislike the transfer portal because it makes things a little bit more confusing in the offseason as far as who's coming in, who's going, who's staying, things like that. But, when used properly, I think the portal is a really good thing for the student athletes. These are guys that probably will get an opportunity wherever they land to play a lot more than they did here at UMD. And quite frankly, they probably deserve that. You shouldn't be locked in at that age to a decision and not be in a situation that you enjoy, and hockey should always be something that's fun. So same with Bruce. I hope they go somewhere. I hope they get to play. I hope they play well, and I hope they enjoy their last year or two here at college hockey.
So I mentioned there's three seniors that could come back still for their fifth year that I as a writer and fans should be keeping track of and waiting to hear from. That would be Tanner Latteru and Jesse Jocks, forwards. Hunter Lelig, a defenseman, also could be back for a fifth year. We've mentioned on this podcast, we thought, Latteru and Lelig would be back. And as I start to look at the depth guys on the line chart and the roster, I think ideally if Scott and UMD can do it, I think you bring back a Jesse Jocks as well. And I'm going to run through the freshmen that are coming in, because I think this does, Scott Sandelin has brought it up. You're really trying to balance things now, because last year teams could go above the 18 scholarship limit. Now they can't. So now there is a cap situation. So the incoming freshmen, by my count right now, you have two defensemen in Riley Bodnarchuk and Aiden Dubinsky. You have four forwards in Kyle Bettens, Jack Smith, Isaac Howard, Ben Steves, and then one goaltender in Zach Sandy. And then we're recording this on Tuesday. On Monday night, Maine junior goaltender Matthew Thiesens, a 2018 seventh round pick of the Canucks, announced he's transferring to UMD. So the Bulldogs get a goalie out of the transfer portal there, because they're going to be losing Ryan Fanti. If you listen to part one of this podcast, Zach and I were unable to convince Ben Pat, despite multiple attempts, to come back for a sixth season. So UMD needs two goaltenders. They have two now to join Zach Stayskull. Just when you look at the depth and everything, of those forwards, and I'm going to pull up my notes on all the freshmen here as I have them. The center position is something I always look at, because UMD has at times had issues there. Heck, just go back to last season when Noah had to move from wing to center. Jack Smith is a center. Kyle Bettens is a center. Jack Smith, that's the former St. Cloud Cathedral standout. He's a Montreal Canadiens draft pick. He's been dealing with injuries. He's only played 10 games of the USHL this year. So you don't know what condition he's going to come back in. And I think that's why it's important, if they can find a way to bring him back, to bring back Jesse Jocks. I know he hasn't been the most explosive or dynamic center out there, but I think he can fit in that third and fourth line role and that's where I believe he can thrive. Guys, your thoughts on the possible fifth years coming back, and maybe what are the needs? That's actually another question from Rick in the email inbox. What do you feel are the Bulldogs' greatest needs going into the season?
Yeah, I think whenever we did that 3 or 4 weeks ago, that Jocks was probably looking like the odd man out, and maybe wouldn't be invited back by the coaching staff because of the 18 scholarship cap and because some of the guys they had coming in. But I think he honestly played pretty well in the final month of the season and might have earned himself an invite back for that fifth year, given what they're looking at. So I wouldn't be surprised as well, Matt, to see if they try to bring Jesse back. Tanner and Hunter, I think, are no-brainers. If they want to come back, you have them back. I've said before, I think if Latteru comes back, he's a no-brainer for the captaincy. As far as what they need, centerman is always a big thing. If they can win more faceoffs, they'll have more of the puck. We talked about that ad nauseum on this podcast and with the coaching staff throughout the years. One of those goalies has got to be pretty good, either Thiesens or Sandy, because we don't know for sure that Stejskal can play every game like we've seen from a Ryan Fanti or a Hunter Shepard in the last couple of years. And they need to eat up some defensive minutes because they lose, 380 career games or something like that between Matt Anderson and Louis Rail, who are leaving. So a guy like Wyatt Kaiser is, Darian Goats. Those guys are going to play more and more. And I think they're ready for it, but they're going to be asked, they're going to be leaned on a little bit more than they have been in the past. So it'll be fun to see what kind of steps forward some of these guys take and what the roster ends up looking like. But I think they're in a good position. It's going to be a bit of a recreation of UMD. It's not going to be the same old team that we're used to, because we got used to some of those guys who have been here for 5 years saying their names and seeing them play. It's going to be different.
Bruce, your thoughts on Latteru, Lelig, and Jocks on how much the team needs those three, and what do you feel are the Bulldogs' greatest needs, the men's team going into the coming season?
First and foremost to me is that number one center spot. Who's on that top line? Is it just the James gang moving up with Olsen and Biondi and taking those minutes? And if that's the case, then you've got a significant hole that's filled. You got Jesse. I think Jesse Jocks does come back if he wants to. I agree with Zach. I think he was the last month and a half of the year. I thought he was very effective and probably earned that opportunity. And then, Kyle Bettens is a guy, I don't watch a lot of junior hockey, but I have had enough conversations with people that it sounds like Kyle Bettens would be almost a perfect fit to play in the middle of one of those bottom two lines. And you've got Carter Loney back, and I'm excited to see the step that Carter Loney takes next season. So if you can, whether it's Dominic James or you find somebody else to do it, you fill that number one center position. I think that you've taken a significant step, and keep in mind the skill coming in with Steves and Howard. Howard might be the highest drafted player this program's ever had. So, finding somebody who can get him the puck in good positions is going to be, I think, a big key going into next season. And then the other thing to think about, you talk about the defensive minutes they're losing. Yeah, Kaiser, Goats, Kelley, Gallatin. Aiden Dubinsky's coming in as a pretty young freshman. Typically, Scott doesn't bring young freshmen in to sit. I got to think Aiden Dubinsky's coming in to play a lot of minutes next year on the blue line for UMD.
Yeah, Dubinsky and Isaac Howard, both prospects in the upcoming NHL draft. Isaac Howard could be a first or second round pick. I think, those are... It's been a while since UMD has been able to bring in two dynamic 18-year-olds that can make an impact, and those two look to do it. I don't think we should sleep on this Riley Bodnarchuk as well. He's going to be turning... There's a good mix of young and old in these freshmen coming in. Bodnarchuk's going to be turning 21, plays for the Okotoks Oilers, the AJHL. Do you recognize that name? A, it's fun to say. B, both Tanner Latteru and Quinn Olson played there. Bodnarchuk, 6'3", 194 pounds. Some size is returning to the Bulldog blue line. They've kind of been a smaller group the past few years, but scoring, I think, is something that we talked a lot about this year, that, some consistent scoring. And I think Howard and Ben Steves are both going to do that. Ben Steves, he's turning 20. He's originally from New Hampshire, played some hockey in high school hockey in Minnesota at Eden Prairie. He's currently 13th in the USHL in scoring with 61 points for Sioux City. But then, the question is just that center spot. Is Jack Smith going to be? I think it's going to be tough to maybe rely on Jack Smith right away to come in. I don't think you want to insert two freshmen into your center position to start the year. And that's why I think if they can find a way to bring Jesse Jocks back, with all three of these guys, there's a lot of components. I think ideally Scott would love to bring everyone back, but you got to find the money for these guys. I don't know if college is expensive. I'm guessing Jesse Jocks, unless he won big on pull tabs recently, doesn't have the money in his pocket to maybe pay for school out of pocket there. And that's why if the money's not there at UMD, he might have to go, look somewhere else for that fifth year. There's the academic component to it as well. Some of these guys have been able to delay and double major and extend it that way. Otherwise, you have to find a master's program that would best suit you as well. And there's so many components to whether these guys could come back for a fifth year. I think everyone would like Jesse Jocks back. It's just finding a way to make it work. And if they can bring him back, it just provides so much more depth. And I think Zach brought up a good point of the goaltending situation. I'll admit I was caught off guard that UMD's brought in a transfer goalie. I didn't see that happening. That didn't really seem to be UMD's MO on goaltenders. Usually it's recruit and develop over time. But we don't know what Zach Stejskal, he's coming off of a cancer diagnosis. Let's not forget that. That's cancer's tough stuff. And I think he showed initially that he's been able to overcome it, but he's got a long off season to probably get his conditioning and everything back to where it needs to be. So Matthew Thiesens, I think, just provides depth from Maine. He struggled a bit, and you can read my story on News Tribune and the Rink Live detailing his career. He struggled since getting drafted by the Canucks, but maybe Brant Nicklin can revive that career here. Just rolling through some of the questions. Jacob Klein asked, any rumors on the transfer portal and getting someone that route? And I wasn't sure UMD was going to go that route. If they don't get these 3 fifth years back, they might have to go to the portal, right, guys?
Yeah, I mean, I looked at it, especially on the defensive side. They've got 2 coming in with Bondarchuk and Davinsky. So typically you're going to carry 8. They actually carried 9 last season. So you lose Anderson, you lose Rail. Presumably Rosenbaum's going to go somewhere else as well. So you're down 3 at game 2. That puts you at 8. So, I mean, I think they're actually on the blue line going to be set, and then it's a matter of making everything work monetarily. If they want to bring Hunter Lelvig back and give themselves an extra defenseman, that's certainly not a terrible idea. And I'm excited to see what Will Francis does back there. Frankly, there aren't a lot of guys on this team that can get shots through from the point, and Will Francis is one of them. I think if once he gets his body back in order, because he's coming off, of course, leukemia himself. Once he gets his body fully back in order, it's going to be interesting to see what he can do out there too. I don't know that outside of the goaltending spot with Thiessen, I don't know that they're going to add another player in the portal. I think that's the shopping there's pretty much done for UMD, unless something really interests the coaching staff that's out there that we might not know about right now.
Yeah, and that was actually one of our questions. Bruce mentions Will Francis from Bulldogs and Banjos on Twitter. Do we see Will Francis having a much bigger role next year on the blue line? I think that's definitely a yes, and that might just be a hopeful yes on my part. I've really been excited. I've made that clear to see Will Francis play. Zach, what do you think about Will Francis on the blue line taking on a bigger role next season?
Well, he's going to have the opportunity, right? Which is something that probably wasn't totally fair to him this year, with Anderson and Rael coming back. Those were 2 guys who were always going to be in the lineup. Kaiser's always going to be in the lineup. Kelly, Goats played his way into an everyday role. So all of a sudden you got 5 guys who are everyday defensemen for you. And then the last spot, or the 7th spot, was kind of a rotating thing. But yeah, I mean, he could certainly play his way into at least the start of the season. He could be in a much bigger role and have a chance to kind of prove it in the game spot. But I think this is probably his first real chance at doing that, right? Coming off the leukemia treatment and maybe not being totally right with your body, and then having all the barriers in front of you lineup wise, it probably wasn't completely fair to him this season. So I think next year is a legitimate chance for him to play his way into an everyday role.
Guys, final thoughts on the roster before we go into everyone's favorite off-season question. I'm surprised it took as long as it did for Dan Jacobson, usually is the asker of this question right away. Final thoughts on the men's roster. Again, the women's, there's not a lot of drama over there. They're basically bringing everyone back. They got a couple interesting freshmen that I think can make impacts. Ashton Bell back from the Olympics, but the men's roster, I mean, if we ask Scott Sandlin right now, about next year's roster, he'd probably say it's a work in progress still, and it might be a work in progress here for a few more weeks. Bruce, we'll start with you. Your thoughts on it?
I'm excited to see what these scoring wings can do. This team obviously struggled to put the puck in the net last season, but it starts to me with what we saw down the stretch, which was improved play from the blue liners, getting pucks through traffic, allowing some rebound opportunities, allowing some tip opportunities. It's fitting the last goal was a seeing eye shot from Darian Goetz, who was the most consistent at doing that throughout the season when you go back to that Denver regional final. So I just want that continued development of guys. Can Will Francis be a force in terms of the power play, which did have its struggles last year, I think, in part because they don't have a lot of heavy shots on that power play. Those are things I'm watching for. And the goaltending situation, I put this on Twitter after we got the word of the Thiessen commit Monday night. It reminds me, just looking at it, a little bit of 2016-17 when Scott Sandlin throughout the month of October was basically like, I'm going to play these three guys. It was Nick Deary and then Hunter Shepard and Hunter Miska. And I'm going to play these three guys, and eventually one of them's going to win the job. And Hunter Miska won the job, I think, maybe a lot sooner than anybody expected him to. And he took the ball and ran with it. And then, of course, Shep would take the ball the following year and run with it as well for a while. But I think this is a situation where you might see if Stejskel's good in terms of being in shape and conditioning wise, and he's healthy, which we certainly hope that he continues to be. You might see all three of these guys play. I'm intrigued by Matthew Thiessen. I think he's got size. He got drafted for a reason. It's because that year in juniors up in Manitoba with his hometown team, Steinbach, he led them to a championship. He was great. He was great in the playoffs. He was great throughout the regular season. And there's something there I think Brent Nicklin can work with, and it'll be interesting to see over a couple of years what they can get out of him.
Zach, your thoughts?
Yeah, drafted goaltenders don't come around all that often. Even in the 7th round, I think it was to Vancouver. It's still, a pretty premium spot for a goaltender. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. I guess I'm most interested to see who among the returning group steps up. If Tanner Latterud is back, I've said I think he's the captain, but what happens if he's not back? Who steps into that role? Got a couple ideas of who I might pick, but who does the coaching staff and the team see in that role? If it's not Tanner, does Blake Biondi really take another big step forward after he took a huge step as far as point production from a freshman to a sophomore year? Can he be a true leader of the team, not just in points and production, but to the guy that replaces Noah Cates, where if you need a shift from somebody in a game that you're struggling in to go out there and turn a momentum, how good can Isaac Howard be? But really, I mean, with a Scott Sandlin team, this goes back to the transfer portal, right? This team isn't built on transfers. Some programs are, but I mean, Scott Sandlin's teams have always been built to play to his identity, the way that he wants the team to play. And this year's team got to that at the end of the year. And that's why they almost made a run to another Frozen Four, is because they finally figured out what they were good at. It wasn't scoring highlight reel goals. It was kind of mucking through games and getting wins that way. If the next year's team can find that identity maybe a bit earlier in the calendar, if they can find it, even if it's like February, but preferably like just after the holiday break, the freshmen are on board and this team understands what it is and how it has to play every night. This year's team really struggled with that. And I don't think they got there until March, really. And it almost worked, right? But if next year's team can get there a little bit sooner, they might see better results down the stretch. But it'll be fun anytime you bring in this many new players into a program that has become kind of accustomed to having some older players on the roster. Maybe since I think the last time we were talking this much about the freshmen and the excitement coming in was when these fifth-year guys were freshmen and they came in as we had 5 freshmen D that one year on the opening night roster. So I think that might be the last time that we're talking about how can the inexperienced guys propel a team forward? Well, we're going to see. We're going to see next fall. It'll be fun.
One last quick question before we take a break here from Dan Jacobson on Twitter. Any rumors on non-conference road series would be appreciated. Dan doesn't care about non-conference home series. He just wants to know where he's going to be traveling. We're still kind of, and Bruce will be the expert on this one, I believe here, but COVID-19, the pandemic kind of backed up some series here. So I believe UMD still has a home series with Wisconsin coming, and I believe that's actually going to happen in the fall here, plus a road series at UMass Lowell. They still owe Lowell a return trip. Bruce, anything you've heard to add to that?
Since this is a podcast, I guess I can throw things at the wall here and it doesn't matter as much. I did hear something about St. Thomas being on the schedule next season. That's not verified. I never did talk to Scott about the schedule. Usually at some point during February and March, I bring it up with him, but it never came up in conversation. So I'm kind of flying blind here. I'm pretty sure Wisconsin, like Matt said, is due, and with UMD's got to go to Lowell. I'm not convinced those are going to happen next season, but they are going to happen at some point. And then Minnesota State, I'm pretty confident they've got 1 year left on their deal with Minnesota State. And that would, I think, be a series in Mankato, actually. With the whole COVID thing, that got messed up. But I think they're going to Mankato next season. And I would not be shocked if Bemidji finds its way in there as well somehow. Keep in mind, they only have 10 non-conference next season because they don't have the icebreaker next year.
Yeah, I believe the Mankato was actually supposed to be 2 in Duluth, or they already did do 2 in Duluth, didn't they?
Yeah,
they did the Thanksgiving.
They did 2 games in Duluth. They've done now they've done a home and home because it was supposed to be a 4-year deal with 2 series at each venue, but the first Mankato series got wiped out by COVID. So they played a home and home this past year, and I think they're doing 2 in Mankato this year, and they're going to call it good instead of trying to make anything else up.
Yeah, so it's usually these schedules are like set in stone multiple years out, but COVID just threw all of these through a loop. So some schools from out east, we've seen on the women's side where, Robert Morris temporarily got rid of their program. That cost the women a series. And then Mercyhurst was supposed to come out and play the Bulldogs, and they cut back their travel. So I know on the women's side, I don't even bother asking more at the end of the season because it seems like it's an entire off-season battle for her to try and convince some Eastern teams other than Harvard to come play out here. UMD's gotten BC, I believe, in the past and such. So it's scheduling's going to be a little wonky here, I think, for the next couple of years. But we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll get to a couple more of your questions, including, yes, your question, Kelly Hinseth. You're listening to the Bulldog Insider Podcast, brought to you by Essentia Health.
I'm McHatton.
I'm Jess Myers, and we are the co-hosts of the Rink Live podcast. We really pride ourselves on finding some unique guests and covering some of the topics of the day, not only in college hockey, but kind of across a broad spectrum.
Yep, we also talk junior hockey. We'll get some of that talk in there as well. Women's hockey, men's hockey. We try to talk to people from throughout the game and actually from all over the country. That's been one of the great things on Zoom.
And Mick and I are kind of OG, the Rink Live guys. We were here from the start, about 3 years ago now when things got off the ground, but we brought a fair amount of college hockey experience to this job. I went to Minnesota Duluth. I covered college hockey starting then when I was a student. I've covered the Frozen Four 28 times, and I primarily cover the Minnesota Gophers now for the Rink Live, but dabble in a little bit of everything.
And I've covered St. Cloud State hockey. Now this will be my 12th season. So please check us out on the Rink Live podcast on Mondays.
Hi there, my name is Dan Williamson, and I am one of the hosts for the Duluth News Tribune Minute Podcast. Hear the most important news of the day, including weather and sports from Duluth, Minnesota, and from around the Northlands. Join me, as well as Barrett Chase and our fellow reporters, as we take you through the local news you need to start your day. Episodes are released Monday through Friday and are available on Apple, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for supporting local journalism.
Enjoying this podcast? Get even more Bulldogs hockey news by visiting DuluthNewsTribune.news/support and take advantage of our limited offer for 3 months of unlimited news for only 99 cents a month. Get this offer now at DuluthNewsTribune.news/support. Welcome back to the Bulldog Insider Podcast, brought to you by Essentia Health. I'm Matt Wellens, along with Zach Schneider and Bruce Ciskie. We're answering your questions in this part 2 of our season 4 finale. We got a couple more to close things out here. Second to last question of the podcast from AHA Bulldog on Twitter. Adam Krause seems to be pretty highly regarded already in coaching circles. Do you see him potentially moving on soon to a USHL head coach/GM gig to get his experience? If that happens, any picks for backfills if it happened, thinking Parker Mackay or Brendan Kotick as recent alums, but sure, there's more. I'll start off on this one. So it used to be like, I think we all remember Brett Larson, was a head coach at UMD for 3 years and then went to the USHL to get some head coaching experience and then came back to college. And I actually had a conversation with Scott Sandlin about this, specifically about Adam Krause, because I kind of thought the same thing early on in Krause's career, that maybe we'd see him leave after a couple of years to get a USHL job. I don't think that's necessary anymore. What do you guys think? That's what Scott was saying too. Like, it's not really necessary to go coach in the USHL. I mean, it's a great gig, don't get me wrong, but I don't think it's necessary anymore. I think Adam Krause can hang around here in Duluth and coach the Bulldogs until that chance comes along. Zach, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's somewhat similar to the conversation we have with players when they're deciding to leave school early or to come back for either a third or a fourth year. So often the conversation is, do you want to be built for a long professional career, or do you want to sign one contract? Because sometimes the opportunity is out there in front of guys and they get kind of blinded by, well, I've got to take the chance when it's there. And we've had the conversation with Scott Sandlin before about, sometimes staying in school is better long-term because you learn things that will help you stay in the game longer. And it takes another year or two to get to that first contract, but then you're going to get a second and a third and a fourth contract. And Adam Krause might be in the same boat in the coaching world, right? He could leave and probably go coach in the USHL and take some lumps and learn some things the hard way that he doesn't know right now. Or he could stay under the wing of Scott Sandlin at a very successful program, obviously a community that he grew up in. His family has roots here. And I don't want to speak for Adam. I don't like speaking for players or coaches whenever we have these conversations, but my sense of him is that he's in no hurry. So when you say, do we potentially see him moving on soon? No, I don't think it's soon, but I think that at some point in his career, he's going to be a head coach somewhere at some level.
Bruce, what do you think? I kind of feel like when I look at Krause, there's some David Carl vibes here too, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's certainly on that trajectory. He got himself in a good spot here to start that off, and I guess I hadn't dug a lot into the whole USHL thing, and is it necessary? Is it not? I'm not surprised that it's not. I think that everything's evolving, and David Carl went down to the USHL, obviously worked out pretty well for him, but that doesn't mean it has to be everybody else that follows that path. And as you remember, Brett Larson came back into college hockey and actually had two different jobs in college hockey before he got his first head coaching opportunity in college hockey. So I think it's I guess it's a little different than players, right? The path to where you want to get's not the same for everybody. So if he can continue to learn and improve himself at his craft and do so, in a program that he's obviously got a tremendous passion for, and for, a head coach that he's got a great relationship with, I say more power to him. Keep doing it.
Yeah, and David Carl, he went to the USHL as an assistant for a couple of years, never as a head coach, and then he went back to Denver as an assistant. I mean, it's a path you can take if you're interested in coaching at the junior level and you find the right junior program. We've seen some drama even in the USHL this past year with one of the franchises. I don't know if it's necessary to have to maybe go get that head coaching experience. I think you can get a lot of head coaching experience as an assistant these days at the Division I level. If you're working for the right person who puts those responsibilities on you, and we're hearing more and more each and every year of Scott Sandlin doing that with an Adam Krause. I mean, he's working with great people right now, and like you guys said, his ties to the community and everything. And, we had Jason Herder on this podcast. I know he's, applied and looked at head coaching jobs, but he's also said it's a grind. Being an assistant D1 hockey coach is a grind, but it's also a pretty good gig as well, said Jason Herder from an ice house on Lake of the Woods.
It's about where your skill set lies too, right? I mean, you compare Adam Krause with the other assistant coach right now, Derek Plant. Derek had a very great playing career, obviously, knows more about hockey than most people that he's going to talk to, certainly knows enough about the X's and O's and the strategy of the game to be a head coach. But Derek's skill set with the kids right now is in that assistant coaching role. He gets to go out and recruit, and he gets to be positive, and he doesn't have to be the bad guy, and he doesn't have to sit in meetings. He gets to just bring a ton of energy to the program. We've seen that in the last couple of years. And, who knows where Adam's true skill set lies. He might have a little bit more of both, a little bit of Scott Sandlin, a little bit of Derek Plant. If he decides that, maybe his skill set isn't suited to the head coaching role, he could be a lifelong assistant and be really, really good at it. And I hope he does it here if he's going to do that, because I think he's been a really, really good addition to the UMD staff in his time.
And as Matt mentioned, Scott empowers these coaches, and he does it more and more every year. And I think as Kraus gains more and more experience, he's going to be asked to do a lot more things. And he's basically been entrusted with the penalty kill here the last couple of seasons. And, the jumps, the improvements that the penalty kill made this year are not an accident. It's the work that Adam's done behind the scenes, working with these players and working with these goaltenders and communicating and making sure that they understand the plan going in. And then all they have to do is execute the plan. They've done a fantastic job.
Flip that to the women's side. Maura Kroll empowers her coaches really, really, really well as well. And that's why Laura Bellamy is still here. Is because she gets the chance to do a lot of the things that a head coach would do. She could easily be a head coach on the women's side, but she's still in Duluth, in large part probably because of the responsibility that Maura Kroll gives her on a day-to-day basis. And Kraus could be the same on the men's side.
Yeah, and you just don't want to chase, I think we've seen this with Laura Bellamy, and I'll admit every once in a while an opening comes around in college hockey and I'll inquire, and I've actually stopped inquiring now, like, oh, are you interested in this? And, I've gotten, responses from various people of whether she's a candidate or not. And she picks her, I think both you'll see Laura Bellamy and Adam Kraus, if they're ever going to be head coaches, it's going to be the right spot, like the right spot. You don't give up an assistant job like this, working with people you like for just any head coaching job. I think we've heard Jason Herter say that as well. He was selective. He could have probably gotten some different head coaching jobs, but he never felt they were the right fit. He was selective when he applied for some head coaching jobs. And I think there's one thing we're overlooking when we're talking about Adam Kraus and Derek Plant as assistants at UMD. And this comes from part 1 of our season 4 finale here. Those two are on a dominant duo in the afternoon hockey league. And I don't know if either one of them are willing to break that up right now. Now they do lose Kobe Roth, a veteran afternoon hockey league guy. Him and Krause have been solid together the last few years here. I don't know if either one of them want to give that up as well, as you don't see head coaches out there in the AHL after practices. All right.
You should give their contract a read. They might have written that into as a bonus to the assistant coaching contracts. That's how seriously they take it sometimes.
Hey, I was trying to get an interview with someone, and I forget who it was, after a practice one day, and Krause and Plant were not going to let that AHL game end. It was tied going into whatever game 7 or whatever they were at that point. Maybe it was game 13. I don't think those two were letting it end until they won that day. And I finally had to leave because it was a never ending game. All right. The final question of season 4 here. It's from back in February from our former co-host, Kelly Hinseth. We didn't get to it at the time. Zach was very angry that we did not get to it at the time. So this is part, we don't want to leave Kelly hanging. Part Zach has really wanted to answer this question for months now. Here's Kelly's question. You're organizing / captaining a rec league outdoor team in Duluth. Who are you picking as your starting 6 and coaching staff? And there's stipulations here. It must be a half male, half female, because this is a progressive pod. UMD past, present, male, female, players, coaches, staff included. The door is wide open. And I don't think she specified what sport. I believe she said this could be like spike ball. So we're just picking for whatever team. It's an outdoor rec league. She didn't specify summer, winter, whatever your thought process is. Zach, you have the floor. Wow us with this team.
Yeah, I put in the work for that podcast we were going to do right after she asked it. So I just didn't want it to go wasted. I thought about this, and I guess I thought about it more from a hockey perspective. But when she says outdoor rec league, I'm thinking snowbanks. I'm thinking 3-on-3, 4-on-4. So you guys might have thought about it from a more fun perspective. I thought about it just from a hockey perspective. Actually, the conversation we're coming off of is a good segue into it, because the coaching staff was actually a tough decision. I thought I wanted Derek Plant on my team. And so with him, I took Adam Krause because of chemistry that they've had not only on the bench, but in the afternoon hockey league, which leaves me with Maura Kroll as my head coach. So we've got the men and the women covered on the coaching staff. Pretty tough to leave Scott Sandlin, Laura Bellamy, Shannon Miller, Laura Schuler. There's a lot of good coaches that have come through UMD. So that might've been one of the tougher decisions. And then starting from the back out, I just went for, starting with goalie, I really wanted to go with a nostalgia pick in goal and go with Taras Lenzik because he was the goalie that I watched in the 90s growing up, going to Bulldogs games at the deck. But I ended up going with Alex Stalock. If we're wanting to have fun, I think he's probably maybe not the most effective goaltender now that we've had the Hunter Miskas and the Hunter Shepherds and Ryan Fantes come through. But Alex Stalock surely was one of the most fun goaltenders that we've ever seen play at UMD. And then there were a couple must-haves. If you're going to play an outdoor game, a couple must-haves in the skater variety. Scott Prunovich is one of them. And then Laura Stalder and Elizabeth Jaguar, I thought were must-haves on my team. And so then I was left with one more woman and one more guy for the skaters. I needed another defenseman, and I thought Jocelyn Larocque would have been good maybe in her college years, but she's played for so long with Team Canada, won a couple Olympic medals. I thought she would be a good maybe stay-at-home deep partner for Prunovich, who might get into some trouble if we're playing 3-on-3. And I couldn't pick Nick Wolf because I was kind of out of options. So he has to have a new D partner. I hope he's okay with that. And then at the forward, I've got Stalder and Jaguar, who are maybe not points wise. I mean, Jaguar didn't play her whole career here. Jaguar, just in the one season, might be the most talented woman to ever put on a UMD uniform. She's certainly in the conversation. Stalder, I think, also in that conversation. But then you've got the Jenny Potters, the Haley Irwins of the world. As well. But I needed somebody to go to the front of the net. I needed somebody to have a little bit of fun, to maybe get in the other team's heads a little bit. And so I went with Bill Watson. Just go to the front of the net, and Stalder and Jaguar will put it off your skate, and it'll go in the net, and you'll score 80 goals again. So that was my team. Like I say, it was a fun experiment. I like thinking about stuff like that. This was honestly a little bit less pressure than when we did the all 2010s team a couple years ago on this podcast, because I felt like that was, about their production on the ice and their value on and off the ice for the Bulldogs and the community. This was a pretty fun question, and I think I got a pretty fun team.
All right, Bruce, who's your team, and kind of take me through your thought process here.
I went hockey, kind of like what Zach did. I'm thinking if I'm building a rec league hockey team, and we're in agreement, because I got to have Alex Stalock in goal for a rec league hockey team. There's not a more entertaining goaltender that's ever put these collars on than Alex Stalock. So I picked Stalock. On defense, I knew Zach would pick Scott Prunovich, so I went a little bit further into the archives, and I found me some Kurt Giles. I thought that they were somewhat similar in terms of their style of play, and so I took Kurt Giles to play defense alongside Ashton Bell, because it's an outdoor rec league. I don't need to necessarily have stay-at-home defensemen. I don't care. They're just going to play, and I think those two are fantastic in terms of options that can just go play the game and create for their forwards. And that's the one spot where I've got another agreement with Zach, and that's Elizabeth Jaguar. I have complete agreement. I don't think there's a more talented player, and no disrespect to any of them, because there's a ton of them that have put on that jersey, but Elizabeth Jaguar is so special. And she's going to play alongside another women's hockey legend at UMD, and that's Jenny Potter, who was probably the best player to put on the UMD uniform for more than one season, one of the more decorated players in program history. And then my head coach / third forward is Derek Plant. So because again, it's a rec league. What do I care? He can coach on the ice. That's fine. He's still got plenty of skill. So Derek Plant's my third forward, and he's my head coach. He's assisted by Laura Bellamy and Mike Surdich, because I want to see Laura Bellamy interact with Alex Stalock, and Mike Surdich is just fun in any situation.
I like the Surdy pick. That was good.
Is Surdy going to be upset that you kind of demoted him there, Bruce?
I think he'll be fine with it. He'll take any role that you give him. He's a team player.
Yeah. So I didn't necessarily think of this as just hockey. I was kind of like, well, I'm just going to pick. These are the people I would, this is a rec league. This is a fun team, right? So this is a group that we're probably going to be kicking back a few beers with, or hard seltzer.
You picked a drinking team.
I didn't pick a drinking team. I thought about my drinking team, but I'm a the reason I didn't pick the drinking team is because I'm competitive and I didn't want this team to be last. Like I'm going to want to win whatever we're in, whether it's spike ball, softball, volleyball, whatever it is. So I kind of just went with, and I'll explain each pick here. Let's start with the coaching staff. My head coach is Hoagie. I'm naming Hoagie the head coach here. Again, we're trying to have some fun. It's a rec league. Does anyone listen to the rec league coach? Not necessarily. So Hoagie, he's going to provide motivation for us. Hoagie's my head coach. I have Laura Bellamy as my assistant coach because I need someone to balance out Hoagie a little bit here. And I feel like Lou can do that. Also, I love Lou's fun facts and hockey history. And I feel like she'd be able to educate us as well. Sometimes we poke fun at Lou for the facts she has out there, but I love them. I really do. I want that knowledge of hockey history on my bench. She might be offended that we didn't put her actually on our team, but like Bruce said, I think we can have coach. It's a rec league, right? Coaches could play. Sure, why not?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So Bellamy can play for me. Hoagie can play. I don't care. It's a rec league. I'll run through then the rest. So the players here. Like, this is the first guy that came to my mind when it was outdoor. Kelly asked the question, and it's Hunter Shepard, because that guy it doesn't matter what he's doing, fishing, hockey. I've heard stories about intramural softball. He takes it seriously. Shep's the guy that's going to keep everyone motivated. The two other players I took, and this comes strictly from part one of the podcast. The guys we're talking AHL. Two guys who give it their all in the AHL every day. We're just talking about them. I'm putting Adam Krause and Derek Plant out there, because if those guys are giving it all at AHL, they're going to give it their all in spike ball, softball, volleyball, whatever we're playing. Those guys are going to give it their all out there. So that's those are the three men's side that I have. I also have Elizabeth Giguère, not necessarily because of the skill. Yes, she's a heck of an athlete, but we've talked about it over and over on this podcast, why we love Elizabeth Giguère and we're happy to have her part of the program this year. She's always having fun. Like, she always reminds you, that's the balance to like when Shep is like getting on us for this rec league game. Giguère's there to balance that out and remind us that this is supposed to be fun. I want that I would personally need that every once in a while. Someone to remind us, hey, we're out here, let's just have some fun. And she's a heck of an athlete too. And then these are just two of my favorite players that I've covered on the women's hockey team. They're incredible athletes, and I think they'd be good at whatever sport we're doing as well. That'd be Lara Stalder, again, super competitive, but a heck of an athlete, and Katerina Mrzova, who is another heck of an athlete out there as well. Love those skill Instagram videos that she does. So that's my team. I think we would be good at whatever sport Kelly Hinseth threw our way. Final thoughts from anyone?
I thought when you were going favorite athletes that you've covered, I thought Nick Wolf would make an appearance on that team, the way you described it, Matt.
Again, if this is a drinking team, I'm probably bringing Wolfie out here. But that might be season 5. We'll compile the team I'm going to just sit and drink with.
Yeah, and then I thought you were going to try and sucker us, to be honest, the way you were describing it, and pick Carson Soucy and Parker Mackay and challenge us to a softball game.
Yeah, those two would be, if it was specifically softball, we need Seuss and Parker. But I'm trying to leave this open. I don't know what sport Kelly's going to throw at us that we've all of a sudden signed up for a rec league there. Seuss and Carson Seuss. Yeah, I mean, and that would be the drinking team too, right? We're going to get the Irma guys. If this is a drinking contest, we're going to get the Irma guys involved in this as well. So, Bruce, your final thoughts on the teams? Zach put in, I think, more thought than any of us in this.
Yeah, there's no question. Zach put more thought into it than any of us did. Which is fine. Though I will say this: you mentioned how seriously Hunter Shepard would take just about anything. Quick Alex Stalock story, since we've got time. This was probably sophomore year for him in Madison. I get in the elevator to head down to the station vehicle and head to the Kohl Center for the game. And Alex Stalock's in the elevator. He's in the back corner of the elevator. And we made eye contact, and I thought I was dead. I have never seen such an intense look on somebody's face 3 hours before a game than I did Alex Stalock that afternoon in that elevator. Still haven't after all these years since. And so, yeah, if it's a hockey game, Alex Stalock's ramped up for it. If it's a different sport, I guess I don't know, but I'll take my chances. He's still a pretty darn good athlete.
Well, and you can act as another forward if you need him out there. I don't know if I'd put him on.
Yeah.
He's not. I don't think he'd be a stay-at-home defenseman. So
no,
another forward. And I'd like this team. I have no defense. Sorry, my apologies to the defensemen of the history of Bulldog hockey. If this is like a 3-on-3 game, I'm just throwing 3 forwards out there all the time. Anyways, no offense. Scott Perenovich though and Ashton Bell would be good picks in there as well. All right, guys, we are going to wrap up season 4 here. For me personally, big thanks to both of you guys. Zach, thanks a lot for you got a late start in the season here with some dad duties, but thanks again for coming along on another season of the Bulldog Insider with me.
Yeah, absolutely. It was an exciting start to the season for a lot of reasons, but I talked with Megan at the start, and this is something that I don't take for granted, and I wanted to be able to do the UMD portion of it if I could. And thankfully she's a saint and she was able to take on a little bit more, and Emmy's doing better. So it was a privilege again to be along for the ride this season, and we'll look forward to next year.
Yeah. And big thanks to Kelly Hinseth as well for filling in at the start of season 4 here. We wish she could have stuck around longer. Who knows? We'll maybe get her involved in season 5 here. Bruce, we made a lot of fun of you saying that we were just desperate, so we brought you on this podcast. It's not true. We've appreciated you taking some time to come talk with Zach, and I hope the listeners appreciated you coming on and bantering with us as well. You've come a long way from the butt end of a joke of at the end of every podcast, which I think was what we did for the first 2 seasons, to now being a regular, almost honorary co-host on the podcast.
And I'm glad that I could be your 3rd or 4th choice or whatever it ended up being. And, I will fly the flag for this program anywhere, anytime, basically. So glad to do it, and appreciate you having me on.
Another big thank you. She's no longer with the podcast. I was about to say she's no longer with us. She hasn't died. She's still around.
No.
She has not died. She's still around. A huge thanks she's one of the founders of this podcast, Sam Erkola, who is no longer with the News Tribune. She's taken a new job with the Entrepreneur Fund, still putting out some great videos and such, and doing multimedia work there. But Sam Erkola was, this podcast doesn't exist without her, honestly, because Zach and I would have just crashed and burned probably out of the gate if we were just left to do this on our own. Sam provided us a lot of guidance through these first 4 seasons. She was she was a saint, and I can't thank Sam enough for the work that she did. And I know it was a ton of work having to edit what Zach and I would put together each week, whether it was in person or on Zoom. So a huge thank you to Sam Erkola for all the work that she did on this podcast. She'll be missed. Big thanks to Dan Williamson, who stepped in and taken over some producer duties as well, with Sam departing. Another huge thanks, as always, I've tried to say their name more this season, Essentia Health. Their support of this podcast. I'm willing to be a sponsor from way back in season 1 and going all the way through season 4 here. We really appreciate their support and of the podcast, of the newsletter. It goes a long way in helping us cover the Bulldogs the way we do with the News Tribune and the Rink Live. Thank you, everyone, especially you, the listeners. It's great to see how the listenership keeps growing on this podcast. Bruce Ciskie did not scare you all away like I thought. He might have even brought a few of you into this podcast. So send us your feedback, what you'd like to see for season 5. If you want to see a season 5, tweet at us. I'm at Matt Wellens or mwellens at duluthnews.com. Zach, where can people hit you up?
Twitter is probably the best place. Z Schneider 218. Or at Grandma's Marathon this June. If you come run or volunteer, I'll be there as well.
Hit Zach up at Grandma's Marathon if you're there. Bruce, where can people find you?
Bruce Ciskie, BruceCiskie on Twitter. or spell it out with a dot in the middle at mwcradio.com if you want to send something a long way.
Like I said, this was part 2 of a 2-part season finale. You can catch part 1 and all of the Bulldog Insider Podcast seasons 1 through 4 on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe and rate us. For continuing coverage of Bulldog hockey throughout the offseason, visit the Rink Live and DuluthNewsTribune.com. That is a wrap on season 4, everyone. Thanks for listening. Yeah, come run Grandma's Marathon or help volunteer with Grandma's Marathon. It might be, is it too late? April, too late to start training, Zach?
Never too late.
Never too late? Okay.
Matt, for you and I, in April is way too late to be training for a June marathon. I'm just going to say that right now.
That's
Bruce
an
Ciskie.
off-season feature, Bruce.
No, not
Bruce
for
and
me,
Matt run a
no.
marathon?
No. I don't want to die anytime soon.
I need
I tell
5
you
years
what.
to prepare for a marathon.
I tell you what, if you want to do it, I'll get you in for free. You won't even have to pay for it.
Oh, you're so
You'll pay
kind.
for it the next day.
You'll pay for it. I'll be more than just the next day. I promise you that.